This is Andrew Hall. You're listening to Dead Hand Radio. My guest for this episode is BK Bass. I first met BK on Twitter and learned about his work as a writer, publisher, and world builder when I interviewed him for my blog. I've also read some of his books, and one of his recent books, What Once Was Home, is a post-apocalyptic story about an alien invasion. Without saying too much, this story is not what you think. It's an outstanding story, and I highly recommend it. For this interview, BK joins me to talk about some issues that this podcast is currently focused on, and that is nuclear war, chemical and biological weapons of mass destruction, their effects, and how they are employed in battle. Dead Hand Radio is currently on a run exploring the Cold War and its impact on our world, our culture, and the future of war. How are you doing, man? How are things going?
Pretty good. Just, dealing with the apocalypse here.
Yeah. Interesting times we live in, to be sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely one way of putting it.
Yeah. My wife's a little freaked out because we're both self-employed.
Right.
And businesses pretty much come to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
Because we live in Vegas, and Vegas, the whole town is just basically on lockdown.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I heard MGM shut down all their casinos, and
I don't think there's a casino open on the Strip anymore. I think they've all shut down. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the safe thing to do. It's gonna be like that for a while.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a couple weeks at least, and it's just, man. I mean, we got some savings, but we're going to go through that pretty quick if we don't have some kind of supplement or whatever.
Did you see yesterday they were talking about sending checks out to everybody?
Oh, no, I did not see that. That's good news.
Yeah, there was a press conference yesterday with, the whole, administration team, but Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, he was at the forefront of it. They're talking about, within, the next couple of weeks, getting money out into people's hands.
That's nice.
Yeah. So I know they're talking with the Senate, so it's on the Hill right now, negotiating the terms of it and everything.
One thing I did hear that was a little spot of good news is that they've submitted a proposal to HUD, the Housing Authority, to put a moratorium on evictions for people missing their mortgage payments or rent payments.
Yeah,
that's going to help people.
Oh yeah. They definitely seem to be, taking it seriously and realizing that, the average person is not prepared for this.
No.
The way the economy, and through no fault of their own, just the way the economy has been for so long, people, just live paycheck to paycheck.
Definitely. Yeah, and that's a shame.
Trying to do something about it now.
Hopefully something like that. I mean, back in 2008, it was pretty dire. Things were pretty bad. Our businesses, again, took a pretty big beating, but we got through that. And, early on, my wife and I learned that you got to have a savings and you got to be debt free. Yeah. Basically debt free. I mean, we have car payment, mortgage payment, stuff like that. But most people don't have that mentality, and they're living.
A lot of people don't even have the ability to do that. A lot of people just barely get by.
True, that's true. Even people working 2-3 jobs, man.
Yeah, just to put food on the table.
Yeah. What do you do besides writing? Is that your primary gig?
Yeah, that and the publishing company. That's
amazing, man. Job. That's awesome. Congrats on that. So you're self-employed too. From here forward, we're going to talk about your military career and what you did and how it relates to what the topic of the podcast is, and that is existential threat to life on Earth and things around that. So how you doing, BK?
I'm doing good.
Good. Appreciate you taking your time to spend some time with me and talk about your military service. And I want to give you a huge shout out and a thank you for that service.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to letting you have a chance to share your experiences with the audience. So to start that off with, would you please tell us which branch of military you were in and how long did you serve?
I was in the U.S. Army. I was a member of the Chemical Corps, and I served from 1997 to 1999.
Can you tell us where you were stationed?
Yeah, I did basic training and AIT, the Advanced and Digital Training, both at Fort McClellan, Alabama. After that, I was stationed in Fort Drum, New York.
Okay, and were you activated during that time, or was it mostly right there in New York City, or I mean, state of New York?
Yeah, it was upstate New York. It was before 9/11 all that happened. So it was just training. It was all domestic.
Hmm.
I spent a little bit of time at Fort Bragg. We spent a couple weeks there on a training thing, but never went overseas or anything.
Okay. Well, I mean, people are in peril even during training missions, so there's uh, there's always a threat to life when you're in the military, even if you're not in a
Mhm.
wartime situation. So,
Oh yeah,
uh,
safety is always a big concern. Whenever we did training, and some of the training was dangerous. Safety was always the number one priority. So.
mhm. And so your technical title or job title was, can you tell me what it was?
Yeah, it was a chemical operations specialist was the
Okay.
actual occupational title.
Okay. And one of the things that I mentioned in the announcement in the announcement for this podcast was that we're going to be talking about NBC.
Right.
And I kind of left that as a teaser because a
Hmm.
lot of people I'm sure don't understand what that is. Could you
Hmm.
tell us what that is and what your job was?
Yeah. Excuse me. That stands for nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. Another acronym that gets thrown around that people might be more familiar with from the news is WMD, weapons of mass destruction. The job basically, deals with that, deals with the response to it more than anything. So the chemical operations specialist in the U.S. Army, there's a lot of different roles involved with that. There's reconnaissance roles and decontamination roles. Depending on the unit you're talking about, there's different specialties involved with that. The unit I was in specialized more in decontamination. And there's also kind of an ancillary, but it was also a primary part of our mission was a smoke generation, which is basically creating smoke screens to cover troop movements.
Okay, cool.
So we had Humvees that had smoke generators on the back of them, basically would burn diesel and mix like an oil, kind of like a vegetable oil, with these huge tanks of smoke oil that would burn and put out these huge clouds of smoke. So, like if you had you're landing troops from like helicopters in a valley or something, we would cover the valley in smoke so that people can see where the helicopters were landing and the guys were moving.
Cool. Yeah, I've always wondered how that was achieved because I mean in movies you see it and
Hmm.
you see the cloud cover, the smoke cover, but you
Yep.
think, you don't know where that smoke's coming from.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
somebody has
That
to
would be
create
us.
that. Hmm.
Yep. Yeah. There's we had Humvees because we were attached to a light infantry. We were attached to the 10th Mountain Division, which is a light infantry division. Attached to your mechanized divisions, your armor, they have armor personnel carriers that
Hmm.
are set up for that. It was the one, God, 113, I think. Um, it's been a while, and they might have upgraded. They might have upgraded that equipment since I was in, because that was Vietnam era
Hmm.
APCs that they were using. They may have upgraded since then.
Yeah, a lot of the equipment from the Vietnam era is still in use today.
Oh yeah.
Consider, I mean, even back to um, when was the B-52 first put into service? Was that back in the
That was
50s?
Late World War II, I think.
Oh, was
B-52.
it? I thought it was like the late 50s,
I
like
could be
mid to late
wrong.
50s. I'll have to look that up because
Yeah.
I'm curious about that now. But well, of course, that wasn't your area. You were in the ground troops, not in the Air Force.
Right. Yeah.
In hearing you talk about what you do, it made me wonder if there was a nuclear disaster in the United States or even abroad, would your unit be activated to respond to that?
Yes, chemical units would respond to that. The unit I was in, would have been responsible for a decontamination situation as far as, vehicles and personnel, getting them cleaned up. Like, let's say if like a unit of vehicles moved through an area, we would be responsible for cleaning off those vehicles, getting contamination off of it, getting contamination off the troops, because you can't be in protective clothing, get exposed, and then just take it off because you're
Mhm.
just contaminating yourself. So there is a routine for, decontaminating the gear and taking it off, decontaminating the person, step by step process.
Mhm.
And there would also be reconnaissance units would be responsible for moving in and evaluating the situation. You hear a lot, when you talk about nuclear war, about fallout and stuff like that. One of the key responsibilities would be to evaluate, the actual fallout, as far as you can measure the height of the mushroom cloud, determine the yield of the weapon, whether it was an air burst or a ground burst, and then compare that to the wind speed and direction, and you can determine where the fallout's going to go and how long it's going to take to get there. And then you can notify the population in that area if they need to evacuate.
Wow. So would that um, be a similar, would you have a similar response to a situation that involved a nuclear power plant accident or possibly even
Mm-hmm.
with a dirty bomb, say in a highly populated city?
Yeah, absolutely. The method for evaluating the circumstances might be different. It's like I said, with like a nuclear explosion, the training we had was based off of, a bomb going off basically, and you have that mushroom cloud, and we had a card we would carry around in our pocket that had all the math on it, and what to measure and how to do the math and determine which way it's going. Without that mushroom cloud, there's other ways that they would have to evaluate that. But again, your wind speed and direction and stuff like that is going to tell you, what direction that's all going to go in. Your fallout comes from debris. So with like a nuclear meltdown kind of situation, it's going to be different. It's not going to be as widespread as it would be with a nuclear bomb, because it's sucking all that debris up into the air and then throwing it out. So you get worse of a fallout situation, as opposed to like your nuclear power plant is going to be, emitting your radioactive waves and stuff. But then, the ground nearby is going to be irradiated, and then the wind's going to pick up and start blowing that around. So you have a lot of similar concerns.
So do you remember, well, the Chernobyl accident would have been before your time, but the Fukushima
Mm-hmm.
accident was after you had already had some training and experience in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, do you how did you look at that Fukushima incident from a perspective of somebody who actually would be tasked to respond to that situation? What went through your mind? Like, what were you thinking about the responders, um, the victims that were suffering in that area? What kind of thoughts went through your mind?
I mean, the first thing would be, the workers, and like you said, the responders, the level of exposure being so high. There's not much equipment that can protect you from direct radiation. Um, you go get an X-ray and they put like the lead apron in your lap, stuff like that. You can't walk around in a lead suit to protect you from direct radiation. Your protective gear is going to protect you from the fallout more than anything, the debris floating around in the air. But the people that had to go in there and rescue people and try to deal with the situation, they were just exposed to all that radiation. I don't know the numbers or anything, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that got sick and died, because they responded to that. The other thing that went through my mind was, because it's so close to the water there in Fukushima, the Pacific was contaminated, and
Mhm.
we're still seeing to this day the spread of radiation through the ocean. And that's, not going to go away in many, many lifetimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And the really scary thing about Fukushima is that there are so many mixed stories coming out of that area, which you don't even know what's true and what's false.
Mm.
Because some people I've heard say that, like you said, that the radioactivity could potentially contaminate a large portion of the entire Pacific Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
There's other people that are saying that the cleanup effort is well underway and people are actually moving back into the area. I mean, which one is true?
Right.
Could they both be true? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, last I heard, there's still hot isotopes in the reactor.
Yeah,
So it's, I mean, all these years later, it's still a containment situation.
that's what I've heard as
Because
well.
it's impossible to go in and shut it off at this point. It's a chain reaction that's going to keep going.
And
So
all of
it's,
that contamination is still bleeding out into the ocean and contaminating the surrounding area. So how could people be? I don't understand how people
possibly,
could be
yeah.
moving back into.
Yeah, I mean, they say that they have it contained, and they you pour feet and, meters of concrete over it and hope that blocks it all. But you get a couple of cracks and some water gets in there and then
Yeah.
flows back out, and then you have contamination. So
And a few
yeah.
decades later from now, you're going to end up with the situation Chernobyl's in, where the dome that they have is crumbling,
Hmm.
because of the radiation just causes the decay in that concrete
Hmm.
to increase exponentially over time.
Yeah.
So they have to take some drastic measures to cover that again with
Yes.
some new structure that they're building. It's going to take a couple of years for them to complete that.
Yeah.
And when it's done, it's supposedly going to be able to operate as an automated cleanup mechanism. They've got robots and stuff in there that are supposed to be able to clean up the area.
Well, that's smart. Yeah, because you were just saying, that they were having to go back in there and build something new, and it just comes back to what we were talking about with Fukushima. That
Yeah.
once you go in there, you're going to get exposure,
Hmm.
and it's a dose over time kind of thing when it comes to radiation. So you can get a certain amount before it starts hurting you, but when you get a whole lot all at once, yeah, it's really dramatic at that point.
Hmm. And if I'm not mistaken, doesn't radiation never leave your system? It'll build up over time.
Hmm.
So if you're,
Yeah. That's why like I said, it's a dose over time kind of thing, and
Mhm.
that's why, like with the medical industry, they'll try to control, how many X-rays and CT scans you get, and why the medical professionals, when they take an X-ray, they have to go into that separate room or go around the corner. One X-ray is not going to cause damage to you, but if you're doing it 5-6 times a day for 20 years, you're gonna get cancer eventually. And yeah,
Mhm.
the effect is cumulative. It builds
Mhm.
up over time.
Okay. And then unless, like you say, in the case where you're exposed to a massive dose, and there have been instances of that happening where
Mhm.
it results in, basically people turning into goo.
It'll cause tissue breakdown. It can cause blistering, burns. The thing that usually your organs just shut down. Lungs, heart. Your organs just, there's so much tissue damage that they just can't function properly. Things just shut down.
What causes the damage from radiation to the cells?
Yeah, I'm definitely not have the medical training or like the nuclear physics knowledge to be really specific about it.
Mhm.
But I do know that like the waves basically, as they pass through, they cause tissue damage. They cause cellular structure to break down. They cause the bonds between molecules to break down. Basically just things fall apart
Mhm.
is the basic idea of it, and it's a lot more complicated than that, but that's the basic idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Understood. I mean, I appreciate you trying to take a crack at that. I don't understand the science of it either. I was just curious how much,
Yeah,
if you knew any more about it.
yeah. I know a little more about the science of chemical weapons, actually, like nerve agents and stuff like that, than I do the nuclear part.
Okay.
The nuclear part, it gets so complicated because you're talking about atomic structures and stuff like that.
Yeah. So the and chemical is another big part of what you did as a chemical operations specialist.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about the chemical side of it?
Yeah. Chemical weapons is a whole different ball of wax, really. You don't have the big blast and everything like you do with a nuclear bomb. Chemical weapons are bad because it's a silent killer. There's no, you can't smell them. You can't see it. There's no big green cloud of poison floating through the air like you would envision from like a movie or something like that. It's completely invisible. And you don't know you've been exposed to it until it's too late. Once you start showing symptoms, there's not much you can do about it. Like nerve agents are one of the big ones, and that's like what the Nazis used in World War II. With sarin and the gas. You hear about the gas chambers and stuff in the concentration camps. They use sarin, and then VX was developed at a later time. And all nerve agents do a similar thing, where basically the way your brain chemistry works is your neurons are sending signals to each other, telling your bodies to do stuff. And there's chemicals in there called inhibitors that are controlling the flow of those chemicals. And what a nerve agent does is it deactivates the inhibitors. So all of those signals basically get turned all the way up. So all of your body's autonomous functions start ramping up and working overtime. So the first symptoms you'll notice is mucous membranes will start working overtime. So like drooling, runny nose, teary eyes, things like that. It's going to work up into loss of bodily functions you can normally control, vomiting, involuntary urination, defecation, things like that. Muscle spasms will start with like twitching, like your forearm might start twitching, something like that. It'll work its way up to seizure level muscle contractions. Your breathing and your heart rate will become vastly accelerated. And usually, when somebody dies from a nerve agent attack, it's either going to be a heart attack or their back muscles will actually spasm so hard that they'll break their own spine.
Wow, that's kind of trippy. I didn't know all that.
It's terrifying. Yeah. We saw a training video when I was in the Army. It was one of those old ones from the 1950s. It was black and white and had the grain in the film and everything. And they exposed a goat to a nerve agent. So we actually got to see this process happen in reality to a goat. I won't describe it in detail, but all the things that I just described, happened to this goat. It was absolutely morbid. It's just terrifying. Probably one of the worst ways a person could probably die.
Are there so there's 1,000 questions that I have, but the first one I have is, are there any measures that you can take if somebody's exposed to that and you know it right away, that you can inject them or give them some kind of treatment to stop the effects?
Yeah, there's actually a couple of chemicals that everybody in the military carries around, and they'll have like a big satchel strapped to the leg that's got their gas mask in it. There's also going to be a couple of injectors. The first one's atropine, which is actually like a sedative. It slows down your heart. So like I said, most people that die from a nerve agent contamination are going to die from a heart attack. The atropine slows that down. So it slows everything in your body down, but mostly slows down your heart rate. So that kind of counteracts that. There's a second chemical, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but that actually will work on cleaning the chemical out of your system.
Okay.
You have to catch it really early, and depending on the amount of contamination, and like you can breathe in some of the vapor, or you can come into actual skin-to-skin contact with the liquid. So depending on how bad the contamination is, whether that's going to be effective or not is a big question. Okay. And even with that, that's like a first aid step. You still need, medical attention after that.
And possibly hospitalization.
More than likely, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much in every case.
So in a combat situation, you're obviously prepared. You've got gas masks
Hmm.
at the ready. You've got the NBC suits that you can put on if you know an attack is imminent.
Hmm.
Um, and you've got countermeasures that you guys have trained for
Yeah.
nonstop, where you hear the alarm, gas, gas, gas. You put on
Right.
the suit, you put on the gas mask, put on the suit.
Hmm.
If somebody's been exposed, they get the injections in their car, they're hauled away.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
that's,
there's also detection equipment. So there's
okay.
there's alarms, and they've had those. I think they've been deployed since Desert Storm, where you have chemical agent monitors and chemical agent alarms that will actually detect it in the air, and an alarm will go off and let you know, if there's a chemical. So that's your first warning.
Mhm. And what are the types of delivery methods that are utilized? I mean, I'm familiar with a couple of them,
Mhm.
and there have actually been militaries around the world that have used those, uh,
Mhm.
like in bombs, in
Mhm.
artillery. What are
Yeah,
what are the main methods used for delivery?
an explosive device is usually the main method. The original, when they first came out, mortars were the way they were usually deployed back in World War One.
Hmm.
And actually, the U.S. Army Chemical Corps started off as a mortar battalion
Hmm.
in World War One and grew into an entire corps out of that. So that was the original way. They can be loaded into artillery shells. Um, it can be distributed in a number of ways. The explosive makes it more widespread delivery,
Yeah.
and basically it's a liquid, and it's I want to say it's not stable state, but in a contained state. Chemical weapons are usually a liquid, and depending on the weapon you're talking about, they have different evaporation factors. Like sarin evaporates really fast,
Mhm.
so it spreads really fast but doesn't last as long, versus VX evaporates very slowly, so it's more persistent but it doesn't spread as fast. So your explosive basically is going to vaporize some of it, so it's going to put the gas in the air, but it's also going to throw the liquid around, and then the liquid's sitting on a leaf or the ground or the hood of a truck or something, and then it's going to evaporate and put more of that gas into the air. You can have a bottle or a vial of it and dump it out, somewhere, and then it's going to start evaporating, and you've just contaminated an area depending on the wind. So the delivery method can be everything from pouring it out of a bottle to an explosive.
All right. Okay. So you were talking mostly about the nerve agents, but
Hmm.
in World War One, they also introduced blistering agents. Do they still
Hmm.
have those in use today?
Well, in use is definitely. I would say it depends on who you talk to as far as in use. In storage, yes.
Okay.
In use, it depends on you're looking at like like Iraq has used them in recent history. Most people have not used them.
Hmm.
Just like nuclear weapons, chemical weapons are banned by the Geneva Convention.
Hmm.
So in most cases, people don't use them. But yes, we have them. I mean, we've got them stored up. There's mustard gas and other blister agents that are in national stockpiles around the world.
Hmm.
And there's also choking agents as another form. Phosgene is the most common one of those. And blister agents basically it causes what it sounds like, blistering to your skin, and even like if you breathe it in, it'll cause blistering inside your lungs and your airway passages. And that's horribly painful. It doesn't always kill people actually, unless
Hmm.
it causes you to not be able to breathe from breathing it in. Blister agents were more designed to remove people from the battlefield in form of casualties, where you cause mass casualties and then more people have to react to that and deal with it. And it's also an area denial thing, where if you know that it's there, you can't go through that area.
Hmm.
Um, and then phosgene and choking agents, they basically cause your cell membranes to not pass oxygen. So basically, you asphyxiate even though you're still breathing,
Wow.
and that's another. Chemical weapons in general are just terrifying. I mean,
Sure.
it's horror movies don't even come close to the kind of suffering you can go through when you're exposed to one of these.
And the interesting thing you hear about is, there's such a big fear of a terrorist getting hold of a dirty bomb. And most people think of a dirty bomb as a nuclear weapon, a small yield nuclear weapon that disperses a large amount of radiation into a city or something. But a dirty bomb could also be a chemical weapon, couldn't it?
Well, I think the term dirty bomb does specifically address the radiation issue of a nuclear device that does more radiation damage than physical damage. But yeah, the threat of somebody, a terrorist coming into possession of chemical weapons or biological agents, that's also a very real concern. Probably the chemical weapons more so than the nuclear, because
Definitely.
the nuclear weapons are very, very hard to create. You can't just grab some uranium and make a nuke. There's a process of making, enriched uranium or enriched plutonium, where basically they have to refine this into very, very potent forms of the element. And it takes an entire infrastructure to do that. You can't just do that in your garage.
So, and it seems to me that we should be more aware of the threat of a chemical agent being dispersed than worried about a nuclear device being deployed. So what do you think? Why do you think that is? How come it's not talked about more, that chemical agents are? Is it to keep the level of fear in check?
It could be that. It might just be that nuclear weapons are so much more high profile, and we have a history of worrying about them. And I know you've been talking about the Cold War lately here on the podcast, and for decades, we sat staring across the table at Russia, worried about who was going to throw the first nuke.
Yeah.
And it's kind of become part of our culture to worry about that. I think that, and just and you look at popular culture too. You look at books and movies, and you've got the day after, the made-for-TV movie in the '80s. Talking about nuclear explosions, and books like The Last Babylon, that is a nuclear war. It's been popularized through fiction, and like I said, it's more high profile. You can picture that flash and that big mushroom cloud and the shock waves and the heat and everything. You can't picture a chemical weapon because there's nothing to picture.
Definitely.
The only popular culture example I can think of it is the movie The Rock, with had Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery in it.
Yeah.
Where some rogue army guys stole some chemical weapons, and every scientific premise about the chemical weapons in that movie is absolutely wrong. For one, almost everything, other than the fact that they had it in a missile and they could have distributed it over the city of San Francisco with a missile, that's true. But the little green balls in the missile is wrong. It would just be like in a metal canister. But yeah, everything else in that movie was absolutely incorrect about how chemical weapons actually work.
There was speaking of movies, there was a good movie. It's either At Your Door or Right at Your Door, and it is about a chemical attack. I think it's in L.A., Los Angeles, and it's about this dude who's a writer, actually.
Yeah.
And he's either a writer or a musician, and he's out of work. He's trying to get something going, and his wife is at work in the city when they hear about the attack that just happened.
Yeah.
And at first they think it's nuclear, so they're afraid of radiation contaminating, and they issue the warning to seal up, basically turn your house into a bunker.
Yeah.
Protect yourself from the radiation. And then it comes out that it's a chemical. And this dude has spent the whole day keeping people from coming into his house, sealing up his house, and then he finds out that it was a chemical.
Actually, it does actually sound like he did the right thing because, in the case of a chemical attack, you would want to seal up as best you can.
Mhm.
And if it was already inside there, he'd die before he got a chance to finish sealing up the house anyway.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes minutes, literally, unless
Wow.
you're exposed. Yeah,
Okay.
it's almost instantaneous. It's not something. It's not like you get sick over a course of hours if there's chemical exposure. That's something that's going to happen within like 10 minutes.
So, and that brings up another question: Is it something that if you're exposed to it and you get treatment for it right away, and you get it out of your system, is it something that if you survive it and you get hit with another attack, is there a cumulative effect like there is with radiation?
I don't think so. Again, I'm not a medical professional, so I don't want to say for sure, but it's one of those things where it's going to do its damage all at once. So if it doesn't stay in your system, it doesn't, and there's no building up immunity to it either. So on the flip side of that, and being exposed to it once doesn't help you out the next time either. Unlike with diseases and stuff, you catch chickenpox once, you can't catch it again. Chemical poisons and stuff don't work that way. So
Okay. So, and this question is kind of off topic, but is that the same chemical they use for administering the death sentence?
I don't think so. No, that is God, it's a completely different set of chemicals they use for that.
Mhm.
I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I have looked into that before, but no, it's different. They don't
Okay.
use no. It's actually not legal to use those chemicals for anything, sir, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the government had the idea of using that for the death sentence, it would be against international law.
Okay. That was just a curiosity that popped up.
Yeah.
More
Well,
of
that's a
it.
good question.
No,
Yeah,
it
it's a really
is.
good question. But no, you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And the danger of exposure too, like the stuff that they use in the death sentence, you have to inject somebody with.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody were to drop a vial of that, it wouldn't kill everybody in the room. But if you
Okay.
had a vial of sarin and you dropped it, everybody in the room is dying.
Yeah. So, okay, going back to your military service, I wanted to ask you, and I've asked this to a couple of other veterans that I know. During your time in the military, did you ever have a moment that you thought your life was in imminent danger, or something that you were faced with that could potentially hurt or kill a lot of people?
Well, on the topic of chemical weapons, we actually had a training facility we had to go to. And I wouldn't say that I felt my life was in an imminent danger because, like I mentioned before, safety was always a big concern, and there was a lot of procedure to this. But we had a training facility we went through that had live chemical agents where we had to go in and detect and decontaminate live agents. So we had to gear up in the full protective gear, the mask and everything, tape up with duct tape around the wrist and ankles, and take an elevator ride a couple stories underground into this underground facility, and go through a couple different training, different rooms and stuff. And they had technicians coming in and putting chemicals out in the room exposed, and we'd have to use the different gear and detect them and test them, and then use the cleaning gear to decontaminate it. And one of them was a street. Basically, it was this huge room, and it was the fake facades of buildings, and there was a wrecked Jeep on the corner and all this stuff, and we had to go through the street and find. I mean, we didn't know where it was. There was puddles on the ground and all kinds of shit. And we had to go through this urban environment and find and decontaminate the chemicals to pass basically it was like a test, to pass through this. So it was, if somebody messed up, if somebody goofed off, or like I said, there's puddles on the ground. If the chemical gear that they use in the military, you can't get wet. If it gets wet, it doesn't work because it's all based on activated charcoal. So if you trip and your knee hits a puddle, you're done. That's going to be it. So it was real, it was a controlled environment, but it was still a life and death situation where if you didn't do everything by the book, somebody's going to get hurt. They even have a medical facility inside that facility in case something happens. They have doctors and nurses and medical staff on hand. And then the decontamination process coming out of there is intense, and there's a huge incinerator there. Basically, all the protective equipment, as it comes off, it goes through these chutes into this huge incinerator, and everything gets burnt. Temperature, I can't remember the temperature, but it was so intense that it would actually destroy the chemicals and stuff, and it goes through all these filters before it goes out in the air.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that was a process. I mean, just decontaminating, coming out of it, going through the steps of washing everything off, taking off the gear, hopping into this scalding hot shower with nothing but a gas mask on, trying to get rid of everything before you start breathing the open air again. That process alone took about 3 hours. After we were done with the work, just the cleanup was 3 hours, getting out of there safely, going through all these different chambers and airlocks and things. I would say the biggest oh shit moment where I thought I was actually going to die, though, I was riding in the back of a Humvee on a recon mission training up in New York, and the private driving the Humvee didn't have much experience and lost control of it, going through a puddle, ran into a ditch, and the thing almost flipped over with me sticking out of the top of it.
Wow.
Yeah, not as interesting as the chemical stuff, but that was probably the closest I came to thinking I was actually going to die, because the thing almost flipped over on me.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I did not let her drive back.
Yeah, right. So the vehicle actually flipped, and you were like
flipped onto its side. Yeah, it was a Humvee with a turtle shell, and I was in the top hatch with the M60, and it was me, the girl driving, and the LT. Him riding shotgun. We were on a recon mission. He was mapping out where we were gonna do our next decon the next day. So we're driving around, and like I said, she lost control of the Humvee, and tire went off in a ditch, and the thing flipped onto its side in a ditch with me sticking out of the top of it. If it had, gone all the way over, it would have cut me in half.
So yeah, fate or luck was on your side that day, huh?
Something, yeah.
So during your time in the military, you obviously learned a lot of life lessons. And anything that you could share with the people that are listening to this that you learned specifically that could help people if they're ever faced with a situation where there's a chemical or nuclear or even a biological threat that they encounter?
Oh boy, that's a tough one, because there's not much you can do if you're in that kind of situation. A lot of times, like I said, like with chemical weapons, by the time you realize something's going on, it's too late. One thing a lot of they don't show in movies with nuclear bombs, though, and something that they had to drill into us because it's kind of counterintuitive. But when a nuclear explosion goes off, there's 2 shock waves, and they go in different directions. So you expect the bomb goes off and a big shock wave comes out and all the debris flies by, and you're ducking and covering, you're laying on the ground, waiting for that to go by. And then everything goes by and the debris stops falling. There's no more shock wave, and you stand up, and then you're dead because stuff hits you in the back. When the bomb goes off, especially with an airburst, it is so hot that it completely obliterates every molecule, oxygen, nitrogen, everything within a certain sphere of that explosion. It actually creates a vacuum like outer space. So after all that stuff goes out, that vacuum bubble has to collapse. And when it collapses, it pulls everything back in. So if there is a nuclear blast and you're taking cover and the shockwave goes by, wait, because there's going to be another one going in the other direction back towards the blast.
That's pretty good advice right there. That's something
a lot of people don't realize it. And we had a test, and they would say blast, 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 and everybody dives on the ground, and then this one guy stands up, and they're like, "You're dead."
Yeah.
You have to wait for that second shockwave. The other thing is, if a nuke goes off and you're close enough to see the cloud, make sure you're upwind of it. Try to get a weather forecast or something if you can. Don't be downwind of it, because that's where the fallout's going.
Yeah, and then don't look directly at the blast or you'll be blinded.
Don't. They go by pretty fast. If you hear it, don't look at it.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of like a reflex thing. It's hard to fight, but yeah, don't look at the blast because it'll blind you. Um, but yeah, that debris thing. If you're far enough away to survive a nuclear explosion, the debris is going to be what you have to worry about. If you're close enough for the thermal wave, the actual heat, you're not going to make it anyway.
Hmm.
But if you're far enough away to survive, that shock wave is what you have to worry about, and debris and flying through the air and stuff like that. That's the part of a nuclear blast you can survive if you're far enough away.
Okay. And then the aftermath, if, once the explosion is over and the fallout starts to come down, you don't want to go into those areas.
Yeah, like I said, you don't want to be downwind of it, and you want to be as far away from it as you can.
Mhm.
Um, if it's a situation where there's only one that goes off, then just get the heck out of there.
Mhm.
If they're going off all over the place, then that's a tricky situation. Trying
Sure.
to figure out
Mhm.
what's farthest away from what's happening. But yeah, if it's just one, you just get the hell out of there.
Yeah, and I don't want this to turn into an epic novel, but it would be interesting to talk about a little bit on what are what are the survival strategies to surviving after something like that happens.
Mm,
I mean, in one scenario, if it was a single bomb, most most people would understand, just don't go into the affected area.
right. Yeah, and there's still going to be infrastructure in other areas, and there's still going to be organization to help tell you what to do. Um, and, in a situation where there's a lot and there's no infrastructure and there's nobody, no leadership,
Hmm.
the biggest thing is going to be contamination at that point. If the blasts are over and you've made it through that, avoiding the radiation is going to be the biggest thing.
So, okay, let me move on. Um, okay, so well, what era did you grow up in? I know I asked you that question before, but
Mhm.
were you a child of the 80s, or did you grow up in the 90s? Or
80s. Yeah.
80s?
Yeah. I was born in 78. So, early years in the 80s, teenager in the 90s.
Okay, so you remember the era of tear down this wall, Mr. Gorbachev.
Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely.
basically that was the end of the Cold War. So
Hmm.
you're familiar with the constant threat of nuclear war between
Hmm.
the US and the Russians, how
Oh,
that
yeah.
affected our culture. How did any of that impact you growing up?
I was really young at the time, but I would say the biggest thing I remember is you see, the old videos from like the 1950s, the duck and cover videos.
Hmm.
They play in schools. If the flash goes off, you jump under your desk and cover your head. And we had those nuclear drills when I was in school, when I was in
Hmm.
elementary school.
Hmm.
And they would show those videos, and then this air raid siren would go off, and we would jump under the desk and duck and cover, and we were young enough to think that would actually help if that happened. Which, depending on the situation, probably wouldn't.
No.
Um, but yeah, we actually went through those, and I remember that um, atmosphere of always of just waiting for something to happen. Yeah, you never knew when something was going to happen. And I think that the biggest memory I have was actually after it ended. After the USSR broke up, and you go to school one day, and there's a map on the wall, and it's got this giant red blotch that says United Soviet Socialist Republic.
Hmm.
And then we went home for, I think it was Christmas vacation or summer vacation, and then came back to school. And the map was completely different. There was like 13 new countries we had to learn. Ukraine and Georgia and Czechoslovakia, and we never heard of any of these before.
Yeah.
And we were, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old at the time. So I'm not going home and watching the evening news or anything. So I was kind of aware of what was going on, but I was young enough. My parents weren't like sitting me down and making me watch, this stuff. So I went back to school. I was like, why is the map different?
Yeah.
Who redrew the entire map of Eastern Europe? And we had to sit here and learn all this stuff. And it was, a huge moment, because your entire life the map is the same, and then all of a sudden it's completely redrawn,
Yeah.
for a sizable region.
That's interesting to see it from that perspective. I was an
Yeah.
adult already. I was in the military when it came out, when it
Yeah.
happened. Um, or actually, my military tour in the Air Force was ending at that time.
Oh,
I can't
okay.
remember if I was in or if I was out, but
Yeah.
but
So you have more of a grasp on, the reality of and why and everything.
oh yeah, I understood
Yeah,
what was
yeah. At
going
the
on.
age I was, it was hard to understand. I mean, like I said, you spend 8, 10, 12 years of your life. This is how things are.
Hmm.
You go to school and the teachers are like, this is this country and this is this country, and that's how it always has been. And you didn't think it was possible for those to change. We weren't deep into world history because, like I said, I was like 10 years old. We weren't learning
Hmm.
about, you know, the Hundred Years War and the Williams invasion of England, and how maps get redrawn over time. We hadn't gotten there yet, and then it happened in
Yeah,
real life now. So it was a wake up call that, hey, maps aren't permanent. Maps get redrawn, and we didn't know that yet because we were still you know elementary school stuff. We were
that's
learning
interesting.
about world wars and stuff like that at the time.
Until you mentioned the Hundred Years War, I forgot what a history buff you actually are.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, definitely.
and then
Yeah, I'm a huge history buff, especially military history, and especially pre-gunpowder age stuff. The
yeah,
classical, ancient, medieval eras. I'm a big history buff with those.
swords and shields and armor and
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah, and talking about maps being redrawn, that's fascinating. How much maps have been redrawn over time, and different regions have changed hands and things like that.
Yeah, it is interesting how, and yeah, I don't want to go into that, man, because that just opens up a whole
Yeah, you'll
new.
get me going for like another 2 hours if you
Yeah,
if you open that can of worms.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe in a future episode, I could have you back
yeah,
on. We can talk about some of that stuff if it's relevant.
yeah. We could talk about some existential threats that happened in the past that we made it through.
Definitely. Yeah.
Be a little, perspective maybe on what we're going through now.
So, as a kid growing up in the during the Cold War era, or towards the
Hmm.
end of the Cold War, anyway,
Hmm.
has has the threat of global thermonuclear war influenced you in any way as a writer? I know you became a writer later on in life, but
Hmm.
has
I
it?
think it has because, when you live through something, it affects your mindset and your perspective on things, and it all comes out in the writing.
Mhm.
Um, and that's 30 years ago, so of course my opinions and views on things have changed over time. But it's a foundation, and it's layer upon layer that gets built up. You don't forget what you knew when you were 10 years old. You just modify that.
Mhm.
And I think growing up in that environment, there was a big us versus them atmosphere at the time. It
Yeah.
was, the West versus the East, the United States versus China and Russia. And it's hard to shake. You grow up learning that, especially as a young child. I think it's hard to shake that. And, a lot of my writing kind of reflects that us versus them mentality. Um, it doesn't always come out as black and white as different nations. A lot of things I write about involve economic issues. So it's the poor versus the rich, or it might be, I write a lot of fantasy. So it's, one kingdom versus another, or once it's home, it's, different factions trying to rebuild after the alien invasion and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think growing up during, even the end of the Cold War, created that idea of factionalism and kind of cemented that into my mind. And I think that's something I've never been able to shake. I try to be open minded, and I know, not every Russian is a red commie bastard and stuff like that. Um, but you still have that mindset of this is how the world operates. It's us versus
Mhm.
them. It's kind of hard to shake that when that's the early formative years of your life. And I think that's, still something in the back of my mind, even though I don't think about it consciously, it still comes out.
Let's see. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the conversation regarding the Cold War or how nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons could affect our culture, our civilization?
Wow. Yeah, you covered a lot of ground. I think the biggest thing, and it's probably the hardest thing, is don't worry about it.
Yeah.
If you start worrying about everything you can't control or do anything about, you're going to drive yourself crazy. We spent decades as a society worrying about nuclear war. And it drove people crazy, and it drove society crazy, and it created that us versus them atmosphere that I talked about. Don't spend a lot of time and energy worrying about it, because if it happens, it happens. You deal with it at the time. There's not much you can do to prepare for it, and even if it happens, there's not much you can do but react to it and just try to deal with it. Like I said, if things are out of your control, worrying about it is not doing you any favors.
Sounds like good advice.
Thank you.
People tend to overreact, and I mean the current situation is a perfect example of that. People freaking out, running to the stores, buying up everything they can think of that they might need, and then people who actually need that stuff aren't able to buy it. And you're not doing anybody favors by
I
going
think
out there and panic buying.
that's a big lesson we can all learn about what's going on right now. Is that we need to remember that we're all in this together, and that if it does come to like nuclear holocaust or something, or as this current situation evolves, you're not going to make it on your own. Even though they're telling us we need to isolate so we don't spread the virus, stuff like that, it's still we have to come through it together as a community, as a global community.
Exactly.
And buying enough toilet paper for the next 5 years is not doing your neighbors any favors.
Yeah.
And if they get sick, they're more likely to contaminate you. And the airborne virus aside, if somebody doesn't have enough toilet paper and there's hygiene issues, you've got other viruses. You're talking about malaria and stuff like that. We're going to compound it with other problems. Everybody needs basic food, hygiene, medicine. Hoarding that stuff is not doing you any favors, because then your neighbors get sick, or they get desperate and they show up at your door with a gun. That's not a situation we want to get into. So if we make sure everybody's taken care of, then we don't have to worry about that situation where it breaks out into violence. That's something I'm afraid of, that we might be going towards at this point, because people are not thinking about their neighbors.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're just in the beginning stages of this whole crisis as far as the United States is concerned. Other parts of the world have been experiencing it for weeks, and in China's case, months.
Yeah.
All of East Asia actually has been experiencing some pretty bad situations for the last couple of months. Our friend JJ Shirty is over there in Taiwan. You know JJ, right?
Yeah.
The writer. He's over there in Taiwan, and he says, that things are pretty bad, but they're getting through it. People are pulling together. The biggest concern that he had recently was that he feels, or a lot of people in that community feel, like the West is putting the blame on Asia and other parts of the world that are not even really responsible for it.
Yeah. This is a natural phenomenon. This is a disease that, the evidence so far that I've looked at, what I've absorbed, is that it came out of, natural causes. And one way or the other, right now is not the time to point fingers.
Exactly.
Right now, the people that are suffering are everyday people. It's your neighbors. It's the farmer down the road, or the farmer across the world. It doesn't matter. It's the guy working at the 7-Eleven or the KFC. It's normal people that are suffering from this. And after it's all done and over with, if somebody didn't react like they should have, didn't handle it properly, didn't say the right thing, we can worry about that then. But right now, we just need to deal with the situation we have, and we need to realize that it doesn't matter if you're white or black or American or French or a Democrat or Republican or libertarian. The virus doesn't care about all that stuff. We're all humans, and we need to realize that we're all in the same boat together. There's nowhere to go. We got this planet, and the whole planet's covered with this thing. So there's no getting away from it. We got to deal with it together.
It brings to mind the example of somebody who has a heart attack, right? You go to the doctor, or you're taken to the hospital. The doctor's not going to sit there and try to figure out, is your cholesterol too high? Was your blood pressure too high? They're going to treat the disease and get you back on your feet. They're not going to worry about what caused it.
Right. Yeah. They're going to treat the condition and get you stable. And then they're going to worry about what caused it and try to do something to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great analogy, because that's what we need to do. We need to take care of the immediate crisis.
Yes.
And then go back and look and see, okay, is there something we can do to keep this from happening in the future?
Right. And what people don't realize, because this is such a slow burn, we're still in the midst of the heart attack as a species.
Yeah. I think we're still at just that tingly, numb sensation in your arm.
Yeah.
We haven't even gotten to the chest pain yet.
Exactly.
I don't want to be, all doom and gloom, but if we want to be realistic and even look at, the officials, the information they're coming out with, they're saying that this is just the beginning of this. This is a long road ahead. It's not going to get, better before it gets worse. So
you have to think on those terms, or you're going to be blindsided.
Yeah.
If you think that this is almost over, or you don't understand the gravity of this, it's going to hit you in the face, and you're not going to be prepared for it.
Right.
Emotionally, or even, you might think you have enough food stores and supplies stored up to withstand this, but if you're not emotionally prepared for the long term, and you're not going to be ready for it, and you need to mentally prepare yourself above all, and be prepared for a long haul in this.
Oh yeah. And of course that doesn't mean hoarding 6 months worth of supplies, because
Exactly.
supply chains are still running.
Yeah.
The trucks are still running. The warehouses are still full of stuff. They just have to get it back on the shelves. But it means being ready for, life to be different. And there to be new rules for a while.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm not even talking about the impact if you get sick. If you get sick, yeah, you have to deal with that. But the people around you are scared, and everybody needs to just take it down a notch, and be logical about it. Approach it in a way that, you need to get through this, and you need your neighbors and your friends to be, and your entire community to be intact when you get to the other side of it. So what can you do to contribute to that?
Right. And the biggest thing is not doing things to help spread it. That's the big message that we're getting.
That's it.
Even if you don't get sick, you can pass it on to somebody else and they get sick. And the more people that are sick, the longer it's going to take.
Yeah.
And the bigger hit the economy is going to take, and the harder it's going to be to rebound. So if we get ahead of this thing now, and just mitigate the spread as much as possible, that's going to shorten the length of time it takes to get out to the other side.
Very good words.
Thank you.
So on that note, I think we'll close this out, and I'm going to put a pin in it so that you and I could revisit some of this at a later time, if that's okay. If you're up for coming back on the podcast.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. I'd love to talk more. I think it'd be interesting, a few months down the road, as things develop and hopefully get better, coming back and, maybe taking a hindsight look at, what's going on. And
for sure. Yeah.
I think it would be interesting. But yeah, I'd love to come back. And thank you for having me on.
Hey, I appreciate it. And appreciate you coming on and contributing to the conversation.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Before I let you go, is there anything that you'd like the listeners to know about what you're working on or what you're doing that they can look forward to from you, from a writer perspective or a publishing perspective?
Yeah, thank you. I actually have a few things I'm working on. I have a sequel to a cyberpunk story I wrote called Nightlife that's going to be coming out later this year. I also have a couple of fantasy books that I'm working on. They're going to be prequels to a series that I've got 4 books out now called the Ravencrest Chronicles. It's dark fantasy, flintlock fantasy. It's probably a good opportunity to kind of escape from the real world stuff. And the prequels that are coming out is a duology. I'm getting both of them done before I release them so they can release at the same time as Curse of the Pirate King and Shadow of the Pirate King. And those are actually going to be releasing for free.
Oh, nice.
There's not going to be any charge for either of those. It's going to be, to be honest, it's partially a marketing thing, but it's also, give back to the community kind of thing a little bit, put something out there for people. I'm currently in the middle of writing the second one, and the first one's with my editor, but I think they'll be out in the next couple of months or so.
And how could people get a hold of you if they wanted to reach out to you on social media or any other way?
You can find me on Twitter at B_K_Bass. And you can also find me on my website, bkbass.com.
Cool. Okay, if there's nothing else, BK, then we'll leave it there. We'll pick this up in a couple months and or sooner. If something comes up and I need a correspondent.
Yeah.
Who knows the world of NBC.
Yeah. Holler at me anytime. I'm happy to come on and talk.
I appreciate that, BK. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, I'll talk to you again, man.
All right. Take care now.
Yep, take care. Well, that was it for this episode, folks. If you have questions or comments about the conversation, you can reach me at deadhandradio@gmail.com. Or you can connect with me on Twitter at deadhandradio. If you'd like to leave me a voice message that may be included in a future episode of the podcast, go to anchor.fm/deadhand/message. You've been listening to Dead Hand Radio, and this is Andrew Hall. Thanks for listening.